Freeman. Clearly a very eventful week. We've got candidates' names flying all over the place. We have one of the best coaches in franchise history out the door. The GM gave a press conference, his first press conference since prior to the start of this season. We've got all that to talk about, as well as prognosticating and looking into the future, something Joe Freeman loves to do as we analyze this Blazers team going into the offseason. All right, first things first. Before we get to the coaching search, let's give some props. Let's talk about Terry Stotts. Much maligned Terry Stotts. Probably a lot of it unfairly, in my estimation, but he goes out after 9 seasons, 8 to the playoffs, second most victories in franchise history, Western Conference Finals appearance as well, but apparently that wasn't good enough. He is gone. What do you think, Joe? You covered him for, 8 seasons?
Well, first of all, before we get into any of that, he was just crushed with the Fentress jinx. I mean, I covered 15 years, Nate McMillan, Terry Stotts, and if you count a Caleb Canales interim, I had 3 coaches. So really just 2 coaches. You come aboard and it just all goes to hell. So I good luck to the follow-up person. We'll see how long they can last.
So it's my fault.
I think so. Ask any fan. They will tell you that. No. It's I believe, years from now when fans look back, I think Terry will always be held in high regard, much like Nate McMillan was held in high regard. It's all about the situation you take over, where you take the franchise from that. Look, second most wins in franchise history, a Western Conference Finals berth, 2 more second-round berths. He helped groom, and you could argue that Dame obviously innately is one of the all-time greats, if not the greatest player in franchise history. But, Terry had a lot to do with that. He brought him up from a little pup and turned him into the wolf that he is now. And so he deserves a lot of credit for that. And, behind the scenes, one thing that you can always say about Terry Stotts, maybe not so much with us media types late in his career, but he was universally beloved and well-liked within the franchise. Support staff, coaching staff, health and performance staff, front office staff, players for the most part, a highest percentage of them really liked him. They liked the culture that he set, the atmosphere that he created, look, we're about going to work. This is about basketball. But it's also a kind of an open office thing. You can talk to me at all times. He's a relatively good communicator, I would say, on the higher end in NBA circles. And you still talk to people right now. If you were to text someone in the organization, they would overwhelmingly speak highly of Terry as a person. That said, all things run its course. And I had a conversation with him kind of in March on the eve of the anniversary of, here we are, our first interruption from the 6-year-old in a video. What, kiddo? I am doing a live video right now. Do you want to come say hi? I gotta go. You can.
I want you to turn off the store now.
Okay, will do. I got you. Okay, love you, kiddo. How many did we get through before we got to the kiddo?
That's hilarious. Oops. That's hilarious.
I feel like
going on here, so who knows what I'll get.
I feel like that CNN guy
who
had to shoo his kid out of the room. What's amazing about 6-year-olds and 3-year-olds is you can tell them something, but they don't care. They're going to do whatever
they're on their own program.
It was kind of on the year anniversary of the coronavirus, kind of shutting down the sports world and including the Blazers. And I kind of had talked to Terry for a story I was working on. And, our conversation deviated a lot through that. And, some of it I can't share, but there was a sense, I could tell there was a sense of him that he knew, if he had this kind of an ending, that I think he knew his time was here. And he kind of had an interesting thought. He was like, for all that he accomplished, you can kind of get, he called it kind of Stotts fatigue. After being at a place for almost 10 years, it's only natural sometimes for it to run its course. And I think that's why he was the 4th longest tenured coach in the NBA. Coaches don't last that long.
Right.
They don't create an atmosphere that fosters success for that long. So, it had run its course. And I think the most ardent supporters and certainly the harshest critics would agree it was just kind of time for him to move on.
Well, they didn't win a playoff series for 14 years until 2014, and that was an upset victory that year over Houston. He was the coach for that team. One of the biggest knocks against him clearly is that they didn't move further into the playoffs. But like I just said, they went 14 years without winning a series. Then you start making it a lot and winning a few, but people want more and more and more. And it's just unfortunate for him that, he ran up against the Duncan Spurs. He ran up against the Warriors before Durant, and then the Warriors with Durant. The 2018 sweep to the Pelicans, that was an underachieving season. That was a bad look, no doubt about that, but no one's perfect. And then the last two seasons, you lose Nurkic for the entire season, last 2 seasons ago until the bubble, Collins until the bubble, Rodney Hood, who was on fire, you lose him too. Somehow you get to the bubble, you get in the playoffs, and who do you run up against? LeBron and AD. You got no chance there. And then now this year, high hopes for this season. They wanted him to fix the defense. It didn't happen. Was it all his fault? You lose Nurkic for most of the season. Plus, when Nurkic was playing into the last 15 games, he was either out of shape or battling a knee injury as well, or on minutes restriction, and they just couldn't quite fix it. I would say, to anyone who would care, that he did a great job. Like, the fact they finished tied for 5th in the West with the tiebreaker over Dallas and the Lakers after losing Nurkic and CJ for a combined 60 games, that to me is an impressive coaching job. But alas, the defense finished 29th. They got beaten the first round by a team that was without one of its all-stars, and Neil Olshey pulled the trigger. So great job by him for his career, but it didn't end the way people would have hoped it would have ended given their circumstances.
Yeah, and I think, and you could say this for any coach who his time ends and he moves on. There's a lot of what ifs to Terry's tenure, and most of them surround injuries, quite frankly. Right. You look at that team when Wesley Matthews snapped his Achilles.
14,
that
15,
team,
yeah.
That was an incredibly talented team with depth and star power and offense and defense. It was, I believe, a team capable of making a really, really deep run that season. Wesley snaps his Achilles. That changes everything. A Flalo, a horrible fit. And then the dominoes fell and the roster imploded the next year. And also, this year, like you said, Nurkic missing so much time, CJ missing so much time. You wonder how things would have been different if they hadn't battled those injuries. And even back to when they went to Western Conference Finals, what if Nurkic was on that team that got as far as they did without him?
They still lose the Warriors, but yes, they would have
probably. But it's kind of a what if.
Yeah.
And so, that's one thing that'll stand out. The other thing that was almost universal in Terry's time that we don't talk about it enough is they always did their best when the expectations were lowest. They, second round, like you said, that was an upset. The year that they beat the Clippers and injuries, aside, still got to the second round of the playoffs. That was a team that was supposed to win, 44 games
according to Vegas. Yeah.
Right. And so
Vegas over was 21 and a half, I think. Yeah.
Right. So far exceeded expectations there. It was the years when they touted themselves that they couldn't deliver. And I don't know if that's his fault or circumstances or what, but whenever expectations were highest, they tended to play the worst. 2 years ago, this year, the year that after you talked about the New Orleans series, that was one of the worst fumbles in recent memory. So yeah, that's an interesting kind of thing there too. But you talk about him being a good coach and a really, really good coach. And I believe we'll see that shortly. I believe he will get an open job here if he wants it sooner than later. But, obviously a critique that came up in spades during Neil Olshey's recent media availability, a critique that has come up time and time again with Terry was his team's defensive performances. And, I guess Olshey made it clear in his availability that he will demand accountability on defense. That will play a role in his coaching search. But right. I guess, Aaron, is that fair? Is that justified?
Yeah, the defense was 27th 2 years ago, 29th this year. Again, your best defensive player, your rim protector, Nurkic. We just talked about how much time he missed this year and the broken leg two springs ago that cost him most of the year 2 years ago. Like, you're not going to have a great defense under those circumstances. Plus, your guards aren't very good defenders. Like, it's just a weird situation to really demand that you're going to have a really good defense. But I think they expected to at least not be 29th. Like, and Neil O'Shea made the point. Like, we were down there ranked with teams that were rebuilding and weren't even really caring at the end of the season. Teams like Orlando, Minnesota, et cetera, Cleveland, right? And he's right. I mean, there's no doubt about that. So you would have think it would have been at least in the 21 range, 20 range, despite the issues that they had. So look, there's a lot of people that have been criticizing his defenses. That's fine. He's been there 9 years. If you want to say it's just time and we got to fix the defense, I'm all for that. But I just hope that people appreciate what he did accomplish here, especially when you compare it to the previous 20 years, going back to, when the thing imploded in 2001 during the Pippen-Stoudemire days. I mean, he did a great job here, but the defense needs to be fixed. So then the question becomes, okay, do we have the personnel on this team? If you're the Blazers, do we have the personnel to really fix it? And who are we going to get who's going to coach the personnel we have to become a better defense? And so my question is, how good can this team be defensively with a small 3-guard lineup, and if you can't trust Nurkic to be healthy? So it's an interesting dilemma for them.
Well, it's the old, is it the roster or the coaching?
And according to Neil, it's definitely the coaching, because he said the roster is not the problem.
Right. And so, I mean, we'll find out with a new staff and new blood, how that shakes out. I mean, I'm sure there'll be some roster adjustments despite what Neil said in his availability anyway. But, you look at the list of candidates, and I don't know if we're ready to move on to that just yet or not. But
one more point before we do. So the way O'Shea approached this, and I thought it was fascinating because he talked about a lack of accountability on defense, not just not playing defense well, but like there was no accountability. And I remember asking Norman Powell back in maybe early April, like when you were in Toronto, actually, I think someone else asked this. I asked a follow-up to it, but I think Dwight actually asked the initial question, but it was, what kind of sense did you have there about the defense in terms of how important it was compared to Portland? And he said it was definitely different. Like in Toronto, they cared about it. It was part of their identity. It was who they are, and they wanted to go out there and stop people. In Portland, it was kind of like, we play defense, right? Mm-hmm. And then late in the season, when they beat Indiana and started their 10 of 12 stretch, Lillard basically said that they just decided as a team, we have to play better defense. It was like, it took you this long to decide this? But what it seemed to come back to was accountability. And how does a coach hold a roster accountable to play good defense, or else? Or your minutes are going to be limited, or you're going to be taken out of the game, or you're going to get chewed out, or what have you. And it seems like there was none of that with this team. If you went out there and you just played bad defense, O'Shea was like, don't do that, but he would leave you in. And so O'Shea definitely said O'Shea said he definitely wants someone who's going to hold the team accountable. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. My experiences in the past have always been that there's been an emphasis on defense. I mean, you break training camp, I can't remember how many times I've written stories about their focus on defense and how much attention they're putting to it. I can't remember multiple times when the Blazers have gotten, kind of had these runs late in the season. There was this big push about defense in it. There were film sessions and, meetings and so on and so forth. And so, it's tough to say exactly what the tenor is and the conversation is behind the scenes, since we don't have that access. But I think it's a little, I don't know, Pollyanna to be like, there's no discussion and no accountability on defense. I think on the whole, a lot of these rosters have not been defensive-minded rosters. I think any Blazers fan that has watched basketball over the last X amount of years would say as much. And as you said, a roster that is built primarily behind the guard duo of Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum is not going to be, unless you have several defensive-minded players behind that, it's not going to be a top 5, top 3 defense in the league. Terry's goal was always to be a top 10 defense. The metrics say you need to be a top 10 defense and a top 10 offense. That is the champion. If you look through the X amount of years, the champion always has that quality in common. So, a lot of it's personnel. I mean,
the 2019 defense finished, I think, 7th, and that was a team that went to the West Finals. So,
I think
that year.
the team that was before Wesley went down, that team was also in the top 10. And the Houston, the second season under Terry, that team was, I believe, in the top 12 or top 10, somewhere in that range. So, but again, that was a different, LaMarcus, underrated defender at the time. Wesley Matthews, a defensive-oriented player. I mean, we could go on down the roster.
Yeah.
Without Nurkic, and we talked about this, oh my gosh, we're still talking about it. But we talked about it so much during the season. Enes Kanter was your starting center for the majority of the year. I want to see a team that he played on that was a good defensive unit under that circumstance.
It's why he keeps bouncing around the league. He doesn't play good defense.
Yeah, he a great locker room guy.
He was unusable against Denver. He was unusable against Golden State when they got swept in the finals, right?
Right. So it's, I mean, the whole and we're going to get in the roster, so I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but again, is it a byproduct of the roster? Is it a byproduct of coaching? Probably somewhere in the middle. But I just think, even if you ask Terry or, 2 years from now or 6 months from now, you talk to Terry, it'll probably be, it was probably just time. 9 years had run its course. We failed to deliver, particularly this year. And it is what it is. It's funny. No one really brings up the pandemic and how it's affected all aspects of the league right now. I don't know if that would have been any different if Nurkic shows up in better shape and the team has a summer and a training camp and a month, to adjust with so many new pieces, like as I talked about so much early in the season. Who knows? Again, it's kind of one of those what ifs. But at the end of the day, you don't deliver, you're gone. So it's plain and simple.
This is true. All right, so let's get to the candidates, because of course, right after the news broke that I keep getting these two mixed up. The news broke that Stotts was out, mutual agreement, by the way. We started seeing candidates. So Jason Kidd's name was out there, Chauncey Billups, Mike D'Antoni, Jeff Van Gundy, which to me is hilarious. No offense to him, but it just was funny that his name was out there. And Juwan
he's
Howard,
offended.
And Juwan Howard seemed to have been the initial 5 that were out there. The Kidd thing was fascinating because Damian Lillard went to his homie Chris Haynes of Yahoo Sports and told him, I want Jason Kidd. Haynes writes this story, and it was just like, whoa, okay, so now, is Dame basically coming out and saying, I want to have some control, I want to have some say in this, and allow this to come out that he wants this guy? And how much pressure did that put on Neil? What was going on behind the scenes? What did you think about that initially?
I was surprised. It was, the timing of it was surprising. That Dame did that was a little surprising. My guess, and I haven't talked to him about it, but it's emotions are raw. The end of the season is fresh. His only coach that he's ever had just got let go, and so there's a lot that goes in with that. The disappointment of talking about wanting to win MVPs and compete for championships to just be dismissed by a team lacking one of its 2 best players, that'll hurt your feelings. And so I was surprised at that. I don't think it did him any good. Obviously, everything imploded. Fans kind of came out against, some of Kidd's checkered pass off the court, and that sabotaged any of that, which is obviously why he pulled, quote unquote, his name out of the running there. Yeah. But look, this idea that Dame doesn't have any say in the coaching search and in personnel moves before all of this is ridiculous. Yeah. He's consulted on and has been consulted on most every major move that's occurred in the last X amount of years.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something?
No, I just interjected. Neil mentioned that as well. Continue.
I can't hear. I think we've got some audio difficulties, y'all.
Really? Shit. Uh-oh. Hold on a second.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Oh, I can't hear you, Aaron.
What the hell?
Well, I'll just keep the idea. Look, Damian Lillard has had a say in personnel decisions and in, he hasn't had to have a say in coaching decisions because the coach has been around and he's universally supported him up until now. So any major move, free agent, trade, or otherwise, there is communication and consultation between the management and Dame, and that has continued to be the case, and it will continue to be the case moving forward. I just think it was kind of a public forum where Dame kind of came out, and I don't know his motivation, behind that at this point. But he elected to do that.
Can you hear me now? What the heck? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Now?
So I apologize. We are having some technical difficulties on the Blazer focused video here.
Can you hear me now?
I'm not sure what's going on, but we have lost our friend. Actually, this is a great thing. We don't really need to hear Aaron anyway. Nobody. I was unprepared to universally give my. They say they can hear you. Someone says they can hear you. I can't hear you at all.
You can't hear me.
I can't hear you at all.
Huh.
It's going to be difficult to do this if I can't hear you.